Hello, people. And this is what if Naruto was in a like he's not in an RPG game. He just has like his body is somewhat in an RPG game while he's still in the physical world. So he can level up. He has tasks, missions he can complete, and other things. And he can also purchase weapons from the HUD or the hub, whatever you call it. And so basically, he can do almost what all RPG games allow people to do. And he's pretty much always had it. He doesn't know why, but he only started seeing. Well, he didn't always have it because he only really started seeing it around the age of 5. But that's besides the point. So Naruto would always be looking at his daily tasks, as they were always there every day, which kind of made sense to him because they were called daily tasks. His first task was to do 30 push-ups. His second task was to do 30 sit-ups. His third was to do 30 pull-ups. Number 4 was to slay 15 enemies. 5 was to run 2 miles, and 6 was to cook. And every time he had leveled up, the tasks would get harder. But the tasks don't give him XP, they just boost his stats. Like cooking boosts his cooking stats, which will allow him to cook better meals or cook a bigger quantity of food. His push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups increase endurance, durability, and stamina. The only task that gives him XP is slaying enemies. So his daily tasks never really get any harder because he never went to go slay enemies. Because when he heard slay enemies, he just summed it up that they meant the villagers, and he never wanted to hurt the villagers. So, he just wouldn't. But he would do the rest of his daily tasks. And eventually they would start getting a lot easier for him to do, to the point where he wasn't even breaking a sweat. And he already was had 2 skills. And when he checked them, he would, when he checked the skills, he was confused, but he had equipped them. And he can equip an infinite amount of skills. So he also had a task that he had seen, and it was to buy a sword. And from doing his daily tasks, well, it wasn't to buy a sword, it was to buy a weapon. He had gained up a lot of money, so he would go into the hub, and buy. I don't even like calling it the hub anymore. I just realized I'm gonna call it the shop. This is the shop. He was going into the shop, and he would buy the Red Moon Blade. He bought it because he liked the name, because it seemed pretty cool, and he liked how it looked. And it was a fairly strong sword as well. And when he was walking through the forest, he had seen a red icon appear above a cave. And when he went into the cave, well, before he had entered the cave, it had said, "Beware, for enemies lurk." So Naruto would say, why would villagers be in the cave? Unless my enemies aren't the villagers. So he would then walk in after pressing the OK button under the display of words. And as soon as he walked in, he seen 2 tall, cricket figures rush him. They both went on one side of him and threw a massive punch, which he had ducked under, before jumping back and locking eyes with a third one, who had jumped up in the air and threw a punch at him, which he had blocked with his sword, but it sent him flying, as he had no stable ground in midair. He ended up catching himself by planting his sword into the ground, stopping him from sliding, and he would run back at the tall figures. One would throw a punch, but Naruto was easily able to dodge, because while 2 levels under them, his stats were pretty high. They were like a little bit higher than theirs, which was enough to make this big of a difference. As he would then slice up the creature's arm and cut off its shoulder, or its like whole arm, but like starting at the shoulder. And then he would stab it through the stomach, making it dissolve into dust, before swinging his sword upward at another beast, slashing straight through it, also making it dissolve. My phone's about to die. Hold up. Let me put this on the charger. He would swing up towards the beast, slicing it in half, making it dissolve. And the third one would try one last attempt to cut Naruto. But Naruto would block with his sword and kick at its leg, snapping it before slicing its head off. Naruto would continue to walk through the cave, and he would get surprised, for there was a rock. It looked different from all the other rocks in the cave, and when he went to touch it, out emerged a giant golem. This golem started hurling rocks at the boy, and Naruto was able to dodge the rocks, but every time he would go in for an attack, it would barely do anything. And he would run up to the golem as it threw rocks at him, and he would start jumping from rock to rock, as they were pretty big, and he was able to fit on top of them. And he would be face to face with the golem, well, what he believed its face to be, as the golem had no eyes, so he couldn't tell. He would slash down at the rock, but the defense was too strong, as he was then smacked away, hitting a cave wall. And he would get an alert on his screen saying, "Danger, health is low." So Naruto would look up at his health bar and see he was almost dead. As Naruto would run out of there, getting chased by the golem, who was still throwing rocks at him. Naruto had just barely made it out, and was kind of scared to go back in. But after regaining some HP, he would go back to fight some of the lower level monsters that he had encountered before. And when taking a closer look, he looked above their heads and realized they were called manhoppers. He had assumed it was because they were like grasshoppers, but a lot bigger. So Naruto would continuously train off of these monsters for days on end. And after a couple years went by, he finally wanted to take on the golem. The only reason why he didn't take on the golem again was because he could never find it. So he just gave up for a while to train again. And because he wanted to, he had to go to school and stuff, so he was also occupied with school. So he never really went searching for the golem. But now he's 12, and he finally wants to go back, so he does. I said 12. I said he's 12 now. Nah, he was 5 at the time when he started fighting the golem. Now he's 7. So he goes back, and he encounters the golem again. So now that he's encountered the golem, he stares it in its eye, in its glowing infrastructure, and runs after it. He would jump in the air, dodging a swipe from the golem, and as he would yell out "Sonic Thrust," as wind began to spin around his sword, and he would thrust downward at the golem, thrusting straight through it and destroying some of the rocks that were a part of its body. He would then yell out Gale Barrage as a green wind would appear around his sword, and he would start slicing at his his legs and his arms, shortening the opponent's movement because his legs were so short, so he couldn't really move that far or much at all, and cutting off his arm so he has less attacks that he can do. Then Naruto would slice upward and be in the sky, and the golem would look up at Naruto as Naruto threw down 3 kunai. Each one had a paper bomb on them, as he can still use weapons from the real world, and they would all explode. And these weapons actually do damage to the NPC monsters, I guess, and the golem would explode into pieces, giving Naruto an abundance of XP. And Naruto will continue to walk as he's seen a cave it was a doorway, I guess, with stalactites hanging from the top of the doorway. So he would walk through as the stalactites will grow longer, and almost in an instant, cutting off the passage to leave. As he would then hear some menacing music, and he would turn around to see the boss of the dungeon. The Viper is what it was called, and it would start slithering towards Naruto, getting ready to headbutt into him. But Naruto would jump out of the way before diving downward and slicing at its neck, but this did no damage at all, as he was then slapped away by the tail, which did a lot of damage to Naruto. But Naruto would get back up and yell, Gale Barrage, as the green winds would appear around his sword once more, and he would start slicing at the snake, doing centimeters of damage with each slice. Naruto would then realize he was outmatched, as the snake started spewing venom in the form of arrows at Naruto, which Naruto couldn't deflect, or the venom would get onto his skin, and the venom was like acid. He had to learn that the hard way the first time, when he tried slicing through one of the arrows. So now he has, he can only dodge. But he had an idea. He would run in front of the door and wait for the snake to charge at him once more. And when it did, he would launch himself into the air using his sonic thrust, dodging the snake's attack, but sending the snake through the door, which worked, since this RPG game still has some aspects of the real world, because in an RPG game you probably wouldn't be able to do that, but here you can, because it is also real life. And Naruto would exit, as he would soon realize the boss wasn't allowed to leave the room, so he felt safe. But he was scared to go back there ever again. But he knew eventually that one day he would. And that day was when he was 12. And he got way stronger. And Naruto, as a 12-year-old, would walk back into the room, having his blade dragged across the ground while holding it in one hand, and having the most demoralizing look. With one look, could send a man straight into fear. And Naruto would stare into the eyes of the Viper as it would charge at him, and he would hold out his sword with one hand and grip it firmly, as he would then block the snake's head from charging into him. And then he would retreat his sword from the blocking motion and cut off the fangs of the viper, allowing him to stop the venom from being formed. And while the viper pulled back in agony, exposing his neck, Naruto would yell, "Gale Barrage," as he started slashing down the neck of the viper, which will make the viper retreat, getting into its defensive stance, coiling up into a ball and raising its head. It started shaking its tail, and then it started pounding it on the ground, sending shockwaves across the whole room, which Naruto had to jump to dodge. And every time Naruto would jump, he would look for an opening, but was not able to find one. Until the last slam, the snake just barely at a small amount loosened his coil around his own head, leaving a part of the neck exposed. Well, a part of the how do I explain this? Right here exposed. As when he loosened the grip up, Naruto had a clear shot on it, as he couldn't really hit his head because the snake would just move its head out the way. But the snake can't so easily move that part of its body. So Naruto would grab his sword and launch it down at the snake, impaling it right through the neck. But the snake was not yet dead, and Naruto would push off the cave walls and punch the snake dead in its eye, sending it straight to the ground. Naruto was not only a strong fighter, but he was physically strong as well, and his punches were enough to shatter the skull of the viper, and then he would kill it, gaining an abundance of XP. And he would start to leave the dungeon as an alert appeared on his screen. It would say, "Abnormal entity has appeared," as he would turn around to see a knight with the level 23 above its head. Naruto was a level 21 at the time, so he didn't know if he was ready. But he checked his skills list, and it turns out he has a new move. It's called the Viper Barrage. As he would then equip the move and rush at the knight, they would clash swords, and then Naruto would look up into his eyes and see the name above. It would say, "The Ghostly Knight." As he would swing down his sword, Naruto would dodge, but just the shockwave alone put rips into the ground. Naruto would then use his sword to slash upward at the armor of the Ghostly Knight, and he realized it did nothing. He would then kick the knight away, and it would dent his armor, which had confused him, because his sword wasn't able to even put a dent in it, but him just doing a normal kick could. And he would keep trying to test a theory he had made up in his mind, and he had realized only physical attacks would affect the knight. So Naruto would put down his sword and get into a fighting stance, and the knight, respecting the art of the duel, would do the same, putting his fist up in front of his face, well, where his face should be, and he would rush at Naruto. He would throw a punch which Naruto would dodge, and then Naruto would counter by putting his hands on the ground and doing somewhat of a handstand, kicking upwards at the knight, but the knight was able to block the attack before swinging his arms down on top of Naruto's head. But Naruto had maneuvered his body to just barely dodge the attack, and the knight's fist hit the ground, shattering the earth under them. This would result in Naruto jumping back, trying to assess the situation. But in no time, the knight was already in front of him, about to deliver a devastating punch. But Naruto had expected this, and he would grab the knight's arm and slam him to the ground. He would then start punching the knight's helmet, and it was doing damage as he seen the health bar going lower and lower. But then he would be grabbed by his face, and the knight would throw him into the wall, as a blue aura would appear inside the face of the mask, and surrounding it a purple aura would appear, as it would then burst up, and through the creases of the armor he would see the energy spewing out, as then it would say Ghostly Knight, and in parentheses overdrive, as he would start zipping around Naruto not even be able to keep up, and Naruto was getting punched from all sides by the knight before being punched into the air. This was enough to knock him out cold, and Naruto had thoughts that he was gonna die, as he then appeared in a room, water on the ground, and everything was dark. He would look up at a big red cage, and he would see the water getting orange below him, and it had caught his eye, so he had stopped looking at the cage. So he did not get a chance to see the fox. But the orange waters would then start surrounding Naruto, and Naruto realized that it was chakra, but he didn't know whose, as he would take one last glance at the cage before being completely enveloped in the orange chakra, and he would see two big red eyes and a large grin, as he then could, just everything faded to black. Now what's really happening, Naruto's eyes would turn red, as he would then just stand up slowly, making the knight turn around, because the knight had presumed him to be dead. And Naruto would appear in front of the knight, even astonishing the knight, making him worried. But it was too late, as Naruto would then punch the knight in his stomach, putting a hole in the armor. And then Naruto would grab his face and shatter the mask in his hand, killing the knight and gaining XP. But not only that, he gained the Ghostly Knight's ability to take the lives of enemies he had killed and being able to summon them later. So Naruto was able to summon the golem that he had killed before and the manhoppers, but he was not able to absorb bosses, as that would be too OP. Well, he can't do it now, at least, for he would need to upgrade the skill to a higher level. But not only that, when absorbing the golem, he was able to get an ability from it, and he was able to manipulate rocks. But his other skills are Sonic Thrust, Gale Barrage, Demon Fang, Flash Step, Meta Slash, and Resurrection, which is the ability to get monsters on his side, pretty much. And his level is 25. And the monsters he have obtained was the Golem and the Manhopper. And Naruto would return home to the village, as he would see everything was in flames. And from the flames, he would see a man with red armor on, and he would instantly connect the dots and rush at the man who had swung his long sword down at Naruto. And Naruto would reach for his sword, but he realized that he left it, so he had no choice but to dodge the attack. And then he would jump up at the knight's face and punch it, sending the knight flying. The knight was able to land on his feet and stop himself from sliding, and he would rush back at Naruto, punching him in the gut, sending him in the sky. And Naruto would be like set free falling. And Naruto would like catch himself by putting one hand on the ground and launching off of it, kind of doing a one-handed handspring and landing on his feet before he would begin, like, before flash stepping from left to right and going in the air sometimes too, as well, to avoid being shot with any projectiles if the knight had any, but also to throw the knight off bound. He would appear under the left arm of the knight, and the knight would swing down with his longsword, but then Naruto would flash step behind him, kicking him in the back of the head, sending him toppling over, but Naruto would flash step beneath him, uppercutting him, putting a dent in the side of his helmet. And this would make the knight mad, as he would then hold his sword with both hands, and a crimson aura would appear around him, as the crimson aura would then go around the sword instead of him, as he would then say, "You have something of mine." And Naruto would be confused, as he would look up above the knight's name and it would say, "The Red Blood Knight," and he would connect it to his sword, as his sword was the Red Blood Moon Sword. So he instantly knew what this was about, and this made him grow angry, as all this was over a sword. And Naruto, out of instinct, would activate the Ghostly Knight's armor, which he had obtained by beating the Ghostly Knight, of course. And he would rush at the Red Blood Knight, and they would clash swords before Naruto would kick the Red Blood Knight back and then appear in front of him, slashing at his leg, cutting him a bit. But this would make the Red Blood Knight angry, as he would punch Naruto in the face, and it would send him toppling over, even rolling on the ground, before Naruto got back up, and in a slouched demeanor, he would pounce at the Red Blood Knight, kicking him in his chest, and then hitting him with the hilt of the sword in the stomach. And Naruto, with the blunt side of his sword, would slam it into the side of the Blood Knight's head. And this would just make the Blood Knight even angrier, as he would trip Naruto and sit down on top of his stomach and start punching him in the face repeatedly, making Naruto's face bloody. And Naruto would reach out a hand and summon something. It was a level 25 Manhopper. As Naruto was a level 25, he could summon level 25 monsters. And the monster would dive in with both feet, drop kicking the Red Blood Knight off of Naruto before going into battle with it. Its superior stature had kept the knight on edge, as since it was taller, the knight would have to block upward to block its attacks. But the monster was using gravity to its advantage, as he could slash down towards the knight, and like gravity would increase the strength of his attacks. So the Red Blood Knight would call Naruto a coward, as Naruto wouldn't care, as this is one of his abilities. So it wouldn't be it wouldn't be him being a coward. It would be him just being smart. As Naruto would appear in front of him and stab straight into his stomach, and then pulling his sword upward, killing the Red Blood Knight. And Naruto realized while the armor does provide protection, he can't be as agile as he wants to be, as he knew that from the pounce, because he wasn't able to really do anything else. Like, he couldn't maneuver his body like he could normally do. So he decided that he was probably gonna leave the armor alone for now. And he also got a title obtained, but it wasn't from killing the Red Blood Knight. He had got it a while ago, as they put timestamps on when he gets achievements or titles. It was called the Night Slayer, Fox Demon in disguise. As he would be confused, because while it was, but this is why it's called that, because he can get titles based off of real world things, and since the game can also be influenced by real world things. So since Naruto's body was the one that killed the Ghostly Knight, but it was Kurama doing it, that's why he's called the Night Slayer, but a demon fox in disguise. Since the fox was pretending to be Naruto, but Naruto would equip it anyway, as that's what he would have appeared to other players if there were any, and he appears that way to NPC enemies like the Red Blood Knight, who will sometimes call them by their titles. And Naruto would go into town and start defeating some of the monsters that the Red Blood Knight had sent down on the village. And he would defeat them pretty easily. Now you're probably wondering why there aren't any Jonin, or why is it how did the Red Blood Knight so easily take over, just start destroying the Leaf Village. He's not destroying the whole Leaf Village. He's on one side of the village, and it's more towards the poor side of the village where there's not many ninja there. So that's why. And since they were pretty far away from the main civilization, it was kind of no one really knew what was happening. But Naruto would absorb these wolf-like monsters, and gain them so he can be able to summon them. But he can also create quills, and he also obtained their fur coats, but he wasn't able to equip it as he wasn't the right class, because a while back he had been given the choice to choose a class. He had the assassin class, the archer class, the mage class, the paladin class, and the berserker class. And he needed to be a berserker to wear this, but he chose assassin. But he doesn't understand how he was able to put on the Ghostly Knight's armor, as he would think that he would have to be a paladin to do that. But honestly, he just doesn't care, because it helped him in the fight, because it gave him a little bit of extra health. After the fight, Naruto became a level 32, and he received the Regal Cave Wolf as another monster he could summon. That's where I'm going to end this part off. I hope you guys liked it. Other than that, stay safe.